listen to me. My reviews have been reduced to, I just liked it, okay? Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about The Whisper Man by Alex North. The Whisper Man officially comes out on August 20th, which today, I don't know. When are you going to release this video? We'll see. But I was given an ARC. I won this ARC actually from the publisher. And also, The Whisper Man was offered as an August Book of the Month pick. So if you're a Book of the Month member, you will have recognized this, seen it, maybe even picked it up yourself. It is a crime thriller, but I hope I don't lose you there, because it is not what I would consider a typical crime thriller. At least it's not the kind of crime thriller that I read or most commonly read. So of all of the genres of thriller, or all of the different categories of the thriller genre, crime thriller is probably my least favorite. That said, I do own a lot of them. I do read a lot of them. They're very common, and I don't hate them. But they're not my favorite because they typically follow the perspective of a law enforcement officer, a detective, a special agent of some kind. And that's great. You know, there's parts of me that are very interested in that perspective, but I'm also a bit darker of an individual. Like, I kind of like to get inside the heads of my victims, or of my, criminals, perpetrators, bad guys. So I think the thing about crime thrillers that maybe doesn't appeal to me as much as some other types of thrillers is that you're kind of stepping into the shoes of very similar characters book after book after book. They're typically always the good guys, or at least have well-meaning intentions, which is to combat evil and to see bad guys locked up and punished. They're for justice. And so it just, it's less interesting to me. I still really enjoyed The Whisper Man. It didn't sound like a crime thriller at all. The story is primarily about Tom and Jake. Tom is the single father of Jake, who is, I believe, like 8 years old. And Tom lost his wife, Jake lost his mother, and they moved to a small town in England. And at the same time, a young boy around Jake's age goes missing. And that crime or incident bears a striking resemblance to a lot of missing boys from 20 years prior in the same small town. Now, the person guilty of those crimes is serving time in prison. So it's a little unclear what would have led to the disappearance of this boy. But it has the same characteristics, which are that all of the young boys who've gone missing and subsequently died, they've all reported to their parents that they've heard a man whispering to them through their bedroom window at night. Hence the killer being titled The Whisper Man. And so when Tom and Jake move into this new house in this new town, and this other boy has gone missing, Jake tells his dad one day out of the blue that there was a man whispering to him through his window. Whew. Okay, so immediate chills. When I first read the synopsis of the book, I was like, oh, give me more, please. Like, this is chilling. It sounds terrifying. There's just something about understated evil and understated darkness. Like, you expect darkness to come busting through the door wielding a chainsaw, not whispering to your child at their window. And so it's just so creepy, right? So creepy. Then through Bookish First, I was given the opportunity to read the first 2 chapters, I believe, the first small portion of the book. And I was transfixed. I really was. I still didn't think that it seemed much like a crime thriller. It seemed very much like the story of father and son, and it was heartbreaking. It was tragic. The beginning talks about the loss of Tom's wife, and the relationship between these two guys after her death, and how hard it is to be a single dad, and how lost the son seems. And it just really tugged at my heartstrings. Like, it really seemed like a very tragically and yet beautifully written book. And so I advocated on Bookish First to receive a copy, and I won one. So it wasn't until I actually sat down to read this copy that I realized we are dealing with more of a typical crime thriller than I first thought. We are introduced to the detective, who is named Pete. He was responsible for gathering evidence and trying to save Frank Carter's victims, Frank Carter being the Whisper Man from 20 years ago. And he's still on the police force, and he ends up getting pulled into this new investigation of the missing boy because of its similarities to Frank Carter's crimes. And so at that point, it became a little bit more crime thrillery. Did that disappoint me a little bit? Yes, it did, because there's so many other unique and compelling things going on with this novel that when it sort of got weighed down by the detective aspect, those things that are so typical of a crime thriller kind of grabbed it and pulled it down a little bit. Otherwise, like, this book is beautiful, man. This book is written beautifully. It becomes this portrait of fatherhood on a lot of different levels throughout the book. And the author writes about that relationship, in several different forms, or in several different ways. Good father-son relationships, bad father-son relationships, etc. The ways that we see, I'm not a son, but I mean the ways that a child sees their parents when they are a child versus the way they see them when they are an adult. And I mean, it's just so multi-layered, all of these different portraits of father and son, that it's really deep. It's an in-depth look at that sort of relationship. Meanwhile, the author has also thrown in really spooky things, not only the Whisper Man, but the fact that Jake sees people that aren't there. There's a young girl that Jake is friends with, only nobody else can see Jake's friend. It's sort of Jake's imaginary friend that he talks to quite often in a very creepy sort of way. There's that aspect that makes it really interesting and a really compelling book, especially when that same friend starts appearing to Jake's father. So it's part ghost story, part crime thriller, part just eerie gothic kind of fiction. It is very dark. There's not much light inside this book at all. And I will say that it doesn't go anywhere near horror. For those of you who might be concerned or disappointed even. It doesn't go anywhere near horror, even though the premise is horrifying, even though the plot implies horrifying things. There's nothing even remotely what I would consider tough to take in this book, especially when you're dealing with children. It doesn't become graphic in any way. In fact, what happens to these victims is never even explicitly described. Like, I don't even know how Frank Carter killed his victims, because it's never explained to me. The characters in the book are always talking about how horrified they are, but there's never anything horrifying presented to the reader. And so whether that's a positive or a negative for you, there's that aspect. I was transfixed in the beginning, absolutely transfixed and carried off by this premise and this relationship between father and son. And like I said, the crime thriller aspects weigh it down a little bit, but it still goes on to be a good book. And I'm a little disappointed in maybe the reveal, the what has been behind this the whole time. Like, what are, who is the puppet master pulling all these strings? I mean, I'm a little bit disappointed in how the reveal turned out, but still, it's a book. If you like a good character-driven thriller of any kind, then I think that you should consider Whisperman. If you like action, this probably isn't your book. If you like suspense, maybe consider The Whisperman, because it is sort of suspenseful. Each chapter does sort of leave you hanging, or it ends with an ambiguous statement or some such thing. So there is some suspense, and there's an eerie, creepy feel to the book for the first half. There's a pretty major reveal in the middle of the book. And to me, that's the point where the tone changes a little bit. It becomes less about these things that I found creepy and eerie and sustained me and kept me like super intrigued in the beginning of the book. It becomes less about that and sort of switches gears a little bit and becomes about the relationship between two characters specifically. So it fell off for me at that point. There's still plenty of reasons to read it beyond the first half of the book. And, you do always feel like something super bad is coming. And it does have this sense of foreboding and this tension and suspense that, makes it a really interesting crime thriller. And that's saying something, because crime thrillers for me aren't always that interesting. They're not always as multifaceted as this book. They're not always as genuine as this book. And probably my favorite thing about The Whisperman is the author. I think that Alex North I love the writing of this book. I loved it. And I think that I was really taken aback by that. I thought the story would be the most captivating thing, and in actuality, the writing is pretty interesting. I incidentally did pick up the Book of the Month copy. I think at the time I didn't know for sure if I would be receiving an e-arc or a physical copy. So I picked up the Book of the Month copy, which will probably remain in perfect condition. I have like a nostalgia type of admiration for this book. I'm not sure why, but I'm just sitting here thinking about it and thinking about what else I could possibly say. And I'm like, oh, this is a good book. But I mean, I can come up with some very critical things to say about it. And yet I have this nostalgic sort of love for this book, and I don't know where that's coming from. I'm not a very sentimental or nostalgic person. And so it's striking me as strange and unusual. In summation, if you are a crime thriller, I always say that. If you are a crime thriller fan, then absolutely don't even question picking up The Whisperman. If you are not necessarily into crime thrillers, but you are a character-driven thriller fan, then please consider picking up The Whisperman. If you're all about action, skip it. But if you are about suspense, maybe pick it up. Those are my guidelines, my purchasing guidelines for The Whisperman to you, my BookTube audience. In my opinion, Alex Michaelides, the author of The Silent Patient, summed it up perfectly. On my ARC copy, the blurb says, "The Whisperman is the most unsettling thriller I have read since Joe Nesbo's The Snowman." I haven't read that book. "Much more than the sum of its parts, it is nightmarish and disturbing, and at the same time, a moving and life-affirming novel about fathers and sons, and grief, loss, and recovery." That is pretty much what it is. Thank you, Alex Michaelides, for summing up in one sentence what I've been rambling on for 20 minutes to say. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. You know, it's spooky, it's scary, but it's beautiful, and it's sad, and it's moving, and it's touching, and you just want to reach out and hug these people. And that's an unusual thing for me to say when it comes to a crime thriller. So in that regard, I think that it's a success, for sure. If you have any questions about The Whisper Man that I maybe didn't address in this entire rambling review, please leave those down in the comment section below. Also, Book of the Month fans, if you've had a chance to read it already, let me know what you thought. And if you do pick it up and read it in the near future, I'm always here and up for a good discussion. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.